This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C., and these are the top headlines of the hour. Ukraine says at least 39 people are killed in a rocket attack on a train station in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk that's being used for civilian evacuations. India says its 2+2 dialogue with the US next week will provide an opportunity to exchange views on regional and global developments and how both sides can work together to address common concerns. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan will address the nation on the eve of a no-confidence vote that looks certain to dismiss him. Pakistan-based terrorist Hafiz Saeed, the co-founder of the terror group Lashkar-e-Toiba, has been sentenced to 31 years in prison in 2 cases. His properties have been confiscated as well. Cash-strapped Sri Lanka's central bank hikes interest rates by a record 700 basis points in a bid to arrest the freefall of the currency in the country's dire economic crisis. And the first fully funded private mission to the International Space Station is set to blast off with a 4-member crew from startup company Axiom Space. Welcome and thanks for joining us. India and the United States are set to hold the 4th edition of 2+2 Dialogue on Monday. The event will celebrate 75 years of diplomatic relations between the two nations. The US State Department has said that the meeting highlights the growing major defence partnership between India and the United States. According to the US State Department, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin will welcome India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh to Washington, D.C. Here's what the US State Department says further, and I quote, "This year's event will celebrate 75 years of diplomatic relations and reaffirm the importance of the US-India partnership. It will reaffirm our shared commitment to a free, open and prosperous Indo-Pacific region." Unquote. In apparent reference to China, the US State Department highlighted the shared Indo-Pacific interests of a rules-based international order that safeguards sovereignty and territorial integrity, upholds human rights, and expands regional and global peace and prosperity. Developing a trade and investment partnership to increase prosperity in both countries is also part of the agenda. India's Ministry of External Affairs has confirmed the unfolding situation in Ukraine will also be discussed during the dialogue. Interestingly, the 2+2 meet comes in the backdrop of the US Deputy NSA for International Economics, Dalip Singh's India visit last week. Singh had warned of consequences for countries circumventing Russian sanctions. He'd cautioned that Washington would not like to see a rapid increase in India's energy imports from Russia. But yesterday, India's spokesperson for the MEA emphasised India's established economic relations with Russia. He said that India's focus has been to stabilise ties in the current circumstances. And again yesterday, India abstained from voting to suspend Russia from the UN Human Rights Council over allegations of horrific human rights violations in Ukraine.
Process.
Suspension of the rights of membership of the Russian Federation in the Human Rights Council. Please lock the machine.
Moving now to Pakistan, the top court has finally taken the much-awaited decision on the ongoing political turmoil in the country. The five-judge Supreme Court bench has given a unanimous verdict and has overruled the Deputy Speaker's April 3rd ruling that rejected the no-confidence motion against Imran Khan. The Supreme Court also overturned the President's ruling on the dissolution of assemblies. The opposition hailed the Supreme Court verdict, with the leader Shehbaz Sharif welcoming the judgment as a big win for democracy. He vows to ensure that the two motions ordered by the apex court are now voted upon. The joint opposition also mentions that they would like to ensure that all political parties could work together and restore the glory of the parliament, which had been undermined by the Imran Khan government.
अब इंशाअल्लाह अगला मरहला अदालत उज़्मा के फैसले के मुताबिक अब वोट ऑफ नो कॉन्फिडेंस अब दोबारा फील्ड में है। इंशाअल्लाह अल्लाह ताला ने चाहा तो हम अपनी इज्तिमाई क़ुव्वत के साथ अल्लाह ताला के फज़ल व करम से ये मरहला कामयाबी से तय करेंगे। उसके बाद दूसरा मरहला होगा, उसका भी अदालत उज़्मा ने अपने फैसले में शॉर्ट ऑर्डर में लिख दिया है, वो लीडर ऑफ द हाउस के चुनाव का, वो भी इंशाअल्लाह अल्लाह के फजल से हम उसको तय करेंगे। इंतकाम का लफ्ज़ हमारे डिक्शनरी में नहीं है। कानून इंसाफ अपना रास्ता अपनाएगा और ये ना गैब का इल्म हमें है ना नैब का इल्म हमें है। अलबत्ता नैब न्याजी गठजोड़ को हम तोड़ के रहेंगे इंशाअल्लाह, जिसने पाकिस्तान को बेपनाह नुकसान पहुंचाया। दूसरी जो आपने सवाल किया उसका जवाब ये है कि अगर पीटीआई वाले इस्तीफा देते हैं तो ये उनकी मर्जी है, लेकिन हम इंशाअल्लाह इस ऐवान के जो सुनहरी रवायात हैं उसके मुताबिक चलाने के लिए हद्दुल मकदूर कोशिश करेंगे एंड पूरी कोशिश करेंगे कि हम सबको साथ लेके।
The PMNL leader and daughter of former Prime Minister Maryam Nawaz Sharif has already declared Shehbaz Sharif as the Prime Minister. But the incumbent Prime Minister, Imran Khan, remains defiant. He's called for the session of the freshly restored cabinet today and will be addressing the nation right after the meeting. But the Prime Minister, meanwhile, has been losing numbers like never before, and the chances of him winning the no-trust vote look extremely bleak as of now. Well, to discuss more about the political future of Pakistan and its present leaders, we're joined by a special guest on our live broadcast, the editor of the Daily Times, Raza Rumi's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Well, let's start with this. The Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan says that he will continue fighting. He has been defiant, but the numbers in Parliament are certainly against him. So do you feel that tomorrow's no-confidence motion is somewhat of a foregone conclusion now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right in saying so. The opposition had already garnered the right number of MPs to topple Imran Khan's government last Sunday, when Imran Khan's deputy speaker from his party acted in violation of the constitution and issued an illegal ruling and dismissed the vote. And thereafter, Imran Khan attempted to dissolve the National Assembly. And as you know, yesterday's dramatic verdict by the Supreme Court of Pakistan has restored the National Assembly. And there are very, very, as you rightly said, slim, or I would say next to none chances, if the vote of no confidence goes through tomorrow as planned and as ordered by the Supreme Court, it's a foregone conclusion that Imran Khan won't be the Prime Minister. Yeah.
What options do you think the Prime Minister Khan, has after the Supreme Court's verdict?
So the options are very limited. I mean, he's meeting the cabinet, and I think in a couple of hours he has announced that he will address the nation, through the state broadcast television. And many people are saying that he might resign. Many say that he would live to fight and perhaps fight the vote of no confidence. But he's going to harp on this theory for weeks and months now. He's been saying that his government is being toppled at the behest of the United States. He's hatching a conspiracy theory where he's referring to some cable by the former ambassador of Pakistan in the U.S., in which some informal discussions with U.S. officials are cited as a proof. It's a very sketchy and a very, very, weak linkage that he's drawing. But, in Pakistan, anti-Americanism is a popular sentiment. So that's what Imran Khan is doing, playing to the gallery, garnering public support on the basis of that. And sadly, many people are buying it, especially his supporters. So he'll probably harp on that theory as well. But he's run out of options. In short, it seems that he would be out sooner than later. Yeah.
If we could turn to the opposition now, Shehbaz Sharif has been named as the opposition's candidate for Prime Minister. But what challenges do you think the opposition now face?
Yeah, that's a big question mark, because if you're following developments within Pakistan, Pakistan is in the midst of an economic meltdown. The price of rupee has been falling consistently, reaching historic lows yesterday. It has revived a bit today, and there's a huge current account deficit. Because the imports have increased and the oil price is going up. It has had a huge impact on Pakistan's economy. So the options before the next incoming government are again very narrow, and it's going to be a very, very tough, ride. Perhaps economic management and fixing some of the problems and the aspects of misgovernance that Imran Khan government had displayed while in power would be the biggest challenge for the next government. And it's not going to be an easy ride for them at all. In fact, many fear that, a lot of economic failures would be attributed to the next government, because people are facing high inflation, unemployment, and they tend to blame whoever is in power. So it is a very difficult time for anyone who sets out to rule Pakistan at this juncture.
Raza, thank you very much for your time today and your analysis. That was Raza Rumi, joining us live from Washington, D.C., the editor of the Daily Times. Well, next today, the United States has decided to end normal trade relations with Moscow in its bid to increase pressure on President Vladimir Putin. The US Congress passed 2 bipartisan bills on Thursday, all aimed at punishing Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. The first bill suspends normal trade relations with Russia, and the second bill bans oil, coal and natural gas from it. They now go to President Joe Biden for his signature. Both parties overwhelmingly supported both of the bills, which had languished for weeks in the Senate as lawmakers worked to hammer out the final details. The legislation, which also applies to Russia's ally, Belarus, enables Biden to inflict higher tariffs on various imports, such as steel and aluminium products, further weakening the Russian economy.
The bill also strengthens the sanctions by ensuring that before the ban can be lifted, Russia must meet 3 clear criteria: withdraws its forces from Ukraine, poses no immediate military threat of aggression to NATO, and recognizes the right of the people of Ukraine to independently, freely choose their own government. This is an important bipartisan victory. There is still more we can do and should do.
Well, combined with the sanctions already imposed on Russia, the latest bills will only inflict more economic pain on Moscow. But the sanctions have not spared US consumers, who are already facing the highest inflation in 4 decades, as prices for key commodities like gasoline and wheat have soared across the United States. The US also approved more military weapons to Ukraine worth $100 million. The latest batch includes 12,000 anti-armour systems, 1,400 anti-aircraft systems, over 50 million rounds of ammunition, 45,000 sets of body armour and helmets, and it also includes hundreds of suicide drones. The US has so far pledged $1.7 billion worth of support to Ukraine. Following suit, the European Union has significantly targeted the Russian energy sector for the first time by imposing an embargo on Russian coal. The EU nations rely heavily on Russia for its energy needs and imports around 45% of their coal from Russia, which is worth more than $4 billion per annum. The EU also approved an embargo on Russian coal. The package includes a time period of 120 days to find alternative suppliers to Russia. In addition to this, it's closed the bloc's ports to Russian vessels. The sanctions package also includes a nearly $11 billion ban on exports to Russia, which includes high-tech goods and freezing Russian bank accounts. The embargo, which begins in the month of August, also aims to cripple the supply of critical raw materials to Russia. Kremlin-friendly Belarus will also be impacted by the embargo. But Germany has sought some time to implement the coal ban. Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Germany will have to wait another 4 months to phase out Russian coal. According to the government, Germany may have to switch off some of its power plants in case of a sudden Russian coal ban.
Aus meiner Sicht ist es so, dass wir, was das Sanktionspaket betrifft, diese Übergangsfrist nutzen werden müssen. Wenn es besser schneller geht, ist ja gut, aber wir brauchen schon ein bisschen Zeit, die Unternehmen auch, die allerdings seit einiger Zeit dabei sind, sich neue Lieferanten zu suchen. Insofern ist das eine gut vorbereitete Lage, in der wir uns jetzt hier befinden.
The European Union is also looking to bolster Ukraine's weaponry by rolling out another $550 million to Ukraine, which takes the total to more than $1.5 billion. Meanwhile, Australia too has sent the first of 20 Bushmaster 4-wheel armoured vehicles, which includes 2 ambulances at the request of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
There'll also be a big ask of the developed world to contribute to the rebuild within the Ukraine, the shelling of residential areas, the destruction of facilities, of government buildings, of all of that infrastructure, which has been the second tragedy, followed obviously by the human tragedy. It'll take a lot of money and support to rebuild, and Australia will be there with Ukraine during that stage as well. We hope that we can get through the war stage into the rebuild stage as quickly as humanly possible.
The United States has made history by appointing the first black woman Supreme Court Justice. 51-year-old Ketanji Brown Jackson has become the first woman of colour to serve on the Supreme Court, which means for the first time in 233 years, white men will no longer be the majority in the nation's top court. US President Joe Biden hailed the Supreme Court confirmation on Jackson's selection, calling it a step towards making America's highest court reflect the diversity of the country. Jackson is US President Joe Biden's first Supreme Court nominee and will be replacing Stephen Breyer, who was confirmed to the bench in 1994. She'll also be the third black justice and the 6th woman to hold the position in the country's top court. She carries 9 years of experience on the federal bench and was voted to the lifetime appointment on the High Court by a vote of 53 to 47 on Thursday, with 3 Republicans joining all of the Democratic senators to approve her nomination, further marking a bipartisan victory for US President Joe Biden. US Vice President Kamala Harris presided over the Senate chamber's historic vote. She is the first black woman to hold the position and one of 11 black senators in American history to have presided over the vote.
Under the previous order, all post-cloture time has expired. The question occurs on the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson of the District of Columbia to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Next today, Japanese artefacts that have been stored at Buckingham Palace have now been put out for public display as part of a new exhibition. With this, for the first time, the general public will get a glimpse of the gifts that were exchanged by the two royal families.
This samurai armour is one of the most prized exhibits from the Queen's Gallery at the Buckingham Palace in London. It was gifted by the Emperor of Japan to the British royal family. Along with this, there are other exquisite pieces of art, like these jars made of Japanese porcelain that were later decorated in France.
Japanese goods could only come to Britain via trading networks, and particularly through the Dutch, who among Europeans were the only traders permitted in Japan. And so in the 17th and 18th centuries, members of the British royal family are purchasing pieces that are shipped all the way across the globe from Japan. They're very expensive, they're very precious, and they're seen as these kind of exotic, alluring, inaccessible pieces which come to furnish the royal palaces.
Diplomatic relations were established between Britain and Japan in 1613, when the first English ship landed on the Japanese coast. The two dynasties have exchanged royal gifts so long as the two nations were not at war with each other. From jewel boxes to screen paintings to small ornate reading tables, the list of items is almost endless.
You will only see what the Japanese royal family gave to the Brits, and it'd be nice to see what the Brits gave in return, because we could do a compare and contrast and see if one party came off the better or not, in our humble opinions. So it would be great to see those two together, but I think because we're quite familiar with what's in the royal collection of British heritage, I think it's a real chance to see what's been given from Japan.
Most of these artifacts have been put in the public domain for the very first time. But what has also attracted public interest in Britain is what gifts did the Japanese royal family get in return from Britain? The organizers of the event say a comparison of the gifts by two royal families could be the subject of another exhibition. Bureau Report.